There's a trend these days, which is mostly positive, for sticking up for yourself, for letting people know if they're crossing a line that's not okay with you, if they're asking you for something that's over the top or too much. And this can be a good thing because we need to make sure that we can take care of ourselves, both mentally, physically, and emotionally. And if we're constantly saying yes to everyone else, that usually means we're mostly saying no to ourselves. But there's a side effect from this growing realization that we need to set boundaries and that we need to say no. And that is that relationships are being damaged. It's not because we've finally decided to set boundaries or to ask for what we need. No, not at all. It's because when we finally decide to say something, we do it wrong. We don't know how. We step into it and run around like a bull in a china closet, and we leave a bunch of smashed glass behind us. And then we walk away, leaving the other person to pick it all up, wondering what just happened. But what I'd like to do here is help you figure out how to move from feeling like you're being oppressed or move from sadness and silence into speaking out for yourself in a way that preserves your relationship from trauma, that saves your reputation at work, that saves your job, and even helps those relationships get better, whether they be family, social life, or at work. You can just skip the part where you leave a mess. Today, we'll explore how to speak up to set boundaries or change the dynamics of a relationship so you can keep the relationships that you care about intact rather than tear them apart and break them down. Specifically, we'll cover 3 of the most dangerous traps people fall into when they're speaking up for themselves. First, speaking up with anger. Second, making assumptions. And third, waiting too long to speak. This is Luci Gabel, Leadership Optimal Performance Coach, speaker, author, and professor at the George Washington University School of Medicine grad program. And this is my podcast, Leadership, Life, Health, and Happiness. You may have noticed I've set a rhythm of every other episode going back and forth between health and then leadership, specifically working with others in leadership. And I'm working on 2 episodes per month, producing them myself right now. So I really thank you for staying with me and for all of your encouragement, likes, comments, and even your emails. I know that your time is precious, and the fact that I have people coming back to listen to these episodes makes me truly happy. So without further ado, let's get on to talking about the myths and misconceptions of communication and other unfortunates. Let me just clarify that this is about speaking with family or partners or friends that you want to keep, people you like. It could also be for setting boundaries in a job that you want to keep. This is not about speaking in relationships that are not healthy for you or need to be ended. So let's get right to it. You might want to get out something to write with, because I'm going to give you some tools to setting boundaries and keeping your reputation, your relationships, and your jobs intact. One of the most dangerous traps when it comes to speaking up for yourself is speaking when angry. One of the first misconceptions is that if you're angry, you need to speak up immediately, or you need to show that you're angry in order for someone to understand the weight of the situation or understand that you really mean what you're talking about. While it's true that if you're angry, it's going to catch someone's attention, there's a much better way of doing it to get better results. We know that in psychology, it's been stated that anger is a phase that we go through when we're moving from sadness and depression up the ladder into better feelings. Anger is one notch above sadness because you're finally starting to take control and finally standing in your power. But being angry is very different from speaking with anger. Let's put it this way. Being angry is an emotion that shows you that you're not happy with something that's going on. Emotion is information. And then you get to figure out what you want to do with it, how you want to handle it. Why not speak when we're in the throes of anger? Well, when we're angry and trying to tell someone something, our emotions are in a fight or flight mode. We're in a stress mode. And this reduces our brain's ability to think rationally, to make good decisions, to read and understand the signals that others are giving to you. And we can't hear clearly what they're saying to us. When we speak from a place of anger, we can be extremely unintentionally hurtful. We end up saying things that we don't mean. We end up exaggerating things. We end up interrupting the other person, and we can very quickly damage a relationship by hurting someone's feelings much more than we intended, even in ways that are irreparable sometimes. And you might be thinking, well, if I don't speak when I'm angry, I'll never speak at all. And if that's so, you've got to change that. The best leaders and influencers of all kinds know and practice how to speak about something they're not happy with. So what do we do with anger instead of pulling it out and throwing it at the person that's making us angry? Well, you feel it, then you find out what it's trying to tell you. Then you decide what part about it you want that person to know, and you basically make a note of it. You prepare to come into the conversation with a clear head, with clear points, and a clear suggestion as to how you'd like to see things change. Not by being demanding, but by working collaboratively with the other person to come to a reasonable conclusion for both of you. If it sounds like you want to dive deeper into that subject, I've got more specifically on difficult conversations in episode 5. And as I mentioned earlier, speaking when you're angry takes away much of your ability to be your best self. I'm going to be straight with you here. When you're asking for boundaries or someone to change what they do with you or how they interact with you, instead of increasing their desire to do that, you can turn the person right off. If you're bringing up a subject for the first time with great anger, it can reduce their trust in you. And if they admired you, it can knock you down a few notches in their mind. At best, during a conversation you start with anger, you'll put them on the defensive, and then they can't hear you or what you're saying. All they'll want to do is save themselves. Am I telling you to stay quiet and let people walk all over you? Absolutely not. But I am saying there is a better way. So you've got to get out of your anger emotions first. Don't ignore them, but don't let them control your conversation. And the best way is to wait until you've calmed down and you're in the right place to have the conversation. And there's benefit to speaking up sooner rather than later, and I'll cover that at the end. But it's helpful if you can put even the smallest bit of time in between your anger reaction and your conversation to help you get out of the anger, fight, flight state. And the best way to get out of that quickly is to start taking some deep breaths. And that will purposefully signal your nervous system that it's okay to calm down. You can take deep breaths anywhere. You don't need to be in a special place, and that's why they're so great. But they work so well and so fast, and that's another reason why deep, long, slow inhales and exhales are so great. I talk more about breathing and other techniques you can use with the nervous system in episode 11. All right, let's move on to the second big trap we fall into when we want to defend ourselves or speak up for ourselves or set boundaries. We make assumptions. So after you get out of that anger stage, you want to put yourself into a detective mode and uncover any assumptions that you're making in your own mind about what's going on. From my experience working with others in leadership and from coaching individuals and groups, I've seen that a lot of anger in relationships is caused by assumptions about the other person. Most of us mind read. We decide we know what people are thinking, why they're doing things, and what they expect from us. And then we act as if our assumptions are true. But most of the time, we're wrong. Here's why it hurts you. When we try to do what people expect and like without knowing what that actually is, it can lead to going overboard, doing too much, giving up ourselves to make someone else happy, even when they don't need that much and they aren't even asking for it. But you're assuming that they do. And second, when we assume what people are thinking or what their motivations are behind their actions, we can get angry with them for no reason. We can hold grudges, create rifts and relationships that are unnecessary and can't be fixed. For example, there are infinite answers to why someone's doing what they're doing and what they're thinking. You don't know their lived experience, the data they have in their head, or even the background knowledge that they have that led them to their actions. And once you find out what that actually is, you might be surprised, or you might even agree that the action they took was a good one. Another example is some of the things that make you angry may not be things that make other people angry. And this person may be doing something that comes off as an affront to you, but if someone did the same thing to them, it wouldn't bother them at all. So they don't think they're doing something hurtful. So in all of these situations, how do you find out what someone really wants or expects from you? What they're really thinking, or why they did what they did? You ask them. We are not mind readers. We have to catch ourselves when we're acting as if we are. I've mentioned in many of these podcasts about the importance of asking questions. And as I practice this in my life and help others with it, I find myself in awe of its power. Asking questions and not assuming can open up doors in your life that you don't even know are there. You may know someone very well, but you don't know them at every given moment in time. It doesn't matter if it's your kid, your spouse, someone you've worked with for 15 years. If they're making you angry or doing something you don't think is acceptable, ask them what they're up to. It can be a little daunting at first, but know that asking questions is a skill that gets better and better as you do it. And right now, you might be wondering what it looks like to ask these kind of questions. So I'm going to give a few examples of some questions that I asked when I was making assumptions in the near past and the outcomes that they had. And then we'll get on to trap number 3. I was working with a colleague of mine on a project, and he got into this role of continuing to repeat himself about what he thought we needed to do. And after a while, I was thinking, gosh, why is he repeating himself so much? Does he not trust that I do what I say I'm going to do? Does he not trust that I understand what he's saying? Does he not trust that I do good work? Like, what's going on? And I was starting to take it personally. He must not think I'm capable. So I thought of how should I address this with him? And at a certain point, I just said, hey, I'm just curious. You seem to be repeating yourself a lot here when it comes to talking about the plan. Is there something you're concerned about? And he gets back to me and says, oh my gosh, no, I'm sorry. It's just my mother was that way, and obviously I'm being that way too. Boom, right? And a final one I want to share is very fast, but it's very important, and that's about my dad. You know, my dad and I are sometimes on different ends of the spectrum when it comes to how we see things and sometimes how we say things. And if something really affects me with my dad, I will gather myself together and ask him what he meant instead of lashing out in response. So I'll say, hey, what did you mean? Or what did that mean? Just curious. Can you explain that? And you know what? Every single time I do it, my dad always has an answer that has to do with how much he loves me. And I feel so foolish. Oh, he's saying that because he loves you and he cares about you or he's worried about you, not because he thinks you're incapable or incompetent, etc. Even though we communicate a little differently these days, ultimately, after I ask him the question about where he's coming from, the answer makes all the sense in the world, and it just dissipates all the tension. So another really important part of this question asking is that you have to believe the answer they give you. There's no use asking questions if you don't believe the answer, because then you're still allowing yourself to live in your own imagination. If you can't believe that someone's telling you the truth about who they are, then the foundation of the relationship has a problem. And that's a much different, deeper conversation that we won't go into today. So I gave you a few examples of questions you can ask. Every situation is different. Every question needs to be tailored to the situation. But I'm going to put a link in the description where you can download a list of questions to think about and get started. So to recap, first, calm yourself from anger. Second, watch your mind reading and ask questions so you know you're addressing the proper problem. And third, it's important to give your anger some time to come down and dissipate, but don't wait too long to talk about it. It's important you catch the action as close to the time that it happens as possible. First of all, for your sake, because holding on to anger causes a lot of underlying stress. As you think about a situation over and over in your mind, it just increases the stress hormones in your mind and body. And we know from current research about stress that too much stress for too long can absolutely lead to so many unnecessary yet serious illnesses, even death. I share a lot more about stress effects and how to deal with that in episode 21. But the second reason why you want to talk about that as soon as you can is shared and leadership courses, and we learn this in parenting and teaching courses. Heck, dog training courses teach it. That it's necessary to give feedback as close to the action as possible so that it has the best impact. What do I mean by this? You want to link the event in everyone's mind to the consequences of the event. For example, someone comes in late equals us having a conversation about being late. Another reason you want to address it sooner rather than later is because people forget specifics. You forget specifics. They forget specifics. The longer you wait, the less accurate you both are going to be recalling information about what actually happened during that event. And the third reason is because it looks bad on you to hold a grudge for a long period of time. If you want to be a leader in any way, even if it's just this one conversation that you're having, you need to be the bigger person. I know it's hard, but with practice, it becomes easier. So as soon as the event occurs, you want to ask questions. What happened there? Just wondering, why did you do that? Just wondering, what were you thinking when you said that? And remember that link in the description for a few more of my suggestions. So we're coming to the end, but I have a few parting words. The more work I do in this area, the more really bad examples of communication I see on TV and in the movies, videos, and books. We have to remember that all of this media is all about drama. It's about entertaining. It's about keeping you in suspense until the end of the show or the scene or the book. It's done for that reason, not for showing you how conversation really goes best. And sometimes, if we didn't have good role models in these kinds of conversations, this is all we have to model from. And we can copy some really, really bad examples. I'm here to help. Reach out to me at lucigabel.com or comment on this episode and let me know what it made you think about and what you'd like to hear about next. If you liked this episode, let me know by clicking like or give it 5 stars. The more activity the episode gets, the more the algorithms allow them to be seen by more people. And on that note, share this with someone you care about if you think it'll help them. This is Luci Gabel. I'll talk to you next time.